Santina Wheat, welcome to the Lean Out podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me today.
You're most welcome. So, tell the audience a little bit about you. Tell us who you are and why your work life balance differs from other people in your chosen profession.
Sure. So I am a family physician by training, and my day job is as a program director. So I train other family physicians to be family physicians. I also am married and have two very active children. And I am someone that has never really felt like I had to work the typical 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, whatever you want to call it. And realized early on that having a differing schedule might actually be better for our family. I did ultimately, unfortunately, go through burnout myself. And in my recovery from that process, also discovered coaching. And so I am also now a career and life coach, really with the goal of helping others who are in medicine find a way to make their career sustainable without feeling like they have to leave medicine altogether or go part time if that's the right answer for them.
Yes, we definitely are aligned in that area. I feel sad when people think that they need to completely leave the profession when there are so many ways to do this career. And you even just mentioned a schedule that's different than what people would expect. So tell me a little bit about what your schedule looks like right now.
So right now, I actually probably have a more typical schedule, the most that I've ever had, except for I work about an hour away from home. And so what I do is in order to live my life and spend time with my kids, I will do some days that are virtual and some days that are at work. But I try to travel at the odd hours. And so that might mean that I'm driving home at a time that's still during the workday, and then I do that, I don't mind that I'm at home working late, filling in those hours, because then that means I'm actually there for my kids. Or I mentioned my two daughters, they're dancers. Sometimes we're at a competition for the weekend and my computer comes along with me. And so I'll get some work done while I'm there in between. They don't really need me. They're off with their teams for a couple of hours. And so I will take those little chunks of time and get things done. But I've always been somebody that has been happy to either work evenings or work weekends if it means that I get that flexibility and autonomy to be able to do other things, whether it's show up for my kids' show at school or be there for their competition or just be there for those important conversations that we need to have.
And how does your workplace handle you doing a little bit of a alternative jockeying of your schedule?
I am very fortunate that my supervisor is really supportive of it. She is of the sense that is if I'm getting my work done, if I'm delivering results, and she's supportive of it. Of course, I'm still there. I still show up and I see patients. I still show up and precept my residents, so making sure that they are getting the training that they need. I show up for different meetings and sometimes those meetings actually help me jockey my schedule because sometimes those meetings are at 7 a.m. So I'm getting there early and then finishing early. And so I think that one of the choices that I made early in my career was knowing that I didn't want to be 8 to 5 clinical, that I wanted to have leadership and education built into my schedule as well. And that, although is not less work, does allow me to have that flexibility and autonomy with my time to get those things done at other times. And so as long as I get those things done, and show up for the important meeting, then typically it's very well supported.
I think that's a really good point. If you're doing your work with integrity and if you're demonstrating that you deliver very high quality patient care and high quality education, then it really shouldn't matter. And it sounds like that the people that you work with or that you work for understand that and they support that. And that is just a very good thing. And these people are out there. I think that a lot of people who get onto the burnout spectrum are in a place where they feel very negative and very down on the system and oh well it's working against me and I'm a victim of this system, but a lot of people really do want to support you and they want to help you to navigate the workplace the way that it works for you. And this is a great example of that.
I think that one of the things that I have learned is if you are willing to be creative in your ask, then the support can be there. Absolutely. And it is
Mm.
about finding those leaders and those peers that are willing to support that because it usually means it's good for them too. I'm definitely not the only one who is able to benefit from a schedule like this.
Yes, yes. And I was going to say one other comment on your commute because I travel for work as well, and it's 3 hours away, but I go for 5 days at a time. And the way that I make this work for me is I do that very part time. I don't do that every single week. And when people see me at work on a Friday afternoon, they're like, "Oh, are you gonna go home?" And I said, "Well, I'll go home tomorrow because the traffic is so bad to drive
Mhm.
at 4 or 5 PM, 3 hours to an area that everyone from the big city is driving to every single weekend, especially in the summer." And so I tend to go like at 6 AM the next morning. Well,
Mhm.
why wouldn't you wanna maximize the time with your family? I already do that because I choose to work a bunch of days in a row and then, take a bunch of days
Mhm.
off. And so it works for me that way, and I don't feel like I'm missing out. So it's another example of being flexible, being creative, and making things look a way that other people kinda look at you side-eyed, but it works for you, and if it works for you, then that's great.
I also think to what you just said, the maximizing the time isn't necessarily the most important piece, right? It's maximizing quality time. And so if you're
Mhm.
sitting in that car for 3 hours and are miserable, then that doesn't help and you don't show up as your best self when you get there. I'd rather be happy and in a good place before showing up for my loved ones. So I'm absolutely with you. I will move things around to make that work.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you have always had this inkling, a couple things, that you wanted to be in a leadership or an education role, and that also you knew that you didn't want your life to necessarily look like the predictable 8 to 5. But you also talked about how you experienced a period of burnout. So tell me, what did your burnout look like?
Yeah, so I don't actually think that my burnout had to do with my schedule. So I've always enjoyed the flexibility of the schedule. Earlier in my career, I was delivering babies, and so that meant 24-hour call shifts, and then that meant that I had these weekends off where I could disappear with my family. The schedule has always been reasonable to me. I also, at my previous employer, had a late start some days and then late end some days. So that meant that I had the opportunity to drop my kids off or do things with them in the mornings. I think what the burnout really came from, though, was feeling like it was my job to show up for everyone or to do everything, that I really didn't understand, that I didn't have to say yes to absolutely everything, and that even if I did say yes to something, it didn't mean that I had to do everything all by myself. I was the person for a long time that answered the phone at any hours of the day. It didn't matter what I was doing, and that really meant that I was split at all times, and I've really had to learn that that's not necessary, that it's okay to put my phone on do not disturb when I'm doing something important, including sleep and taking care of myself. I learned that sometimes if I delegate something strategically, so make sure I'm handing it to somebody that can grow from it, that will benefit from doing it, and not just doing it uh, as sort of passing the buck, it would be good for both of us and it would allow my team to be more sustainable as a whole and people would feel like they could develop. And once I realized that, when I realized I didn't have to do everything, that was really helpful. And I used to be that person that thought if you asked me for something and said that it was urgent, that meant like that same day. And I started learning to have a little bit more curiosity about the things that were requested of me and so I sometimes found that what people thought as urgent really maybe meant in 2 weeks, and it didn't necessarily mean today. And so I was pushing myself in ways that I didn't have to. And so now I just take a little bit longer to understand actual expectations before moving forward so that I'm not quite as reactive. And all of those things were things that I wasn't doing before that just really led me to be in a bad place. And these are now the things that are helping keep me out of it.
Well, so tell me, how did you learn to place better boundaries, to delay, and to not necessarily want to do everything 100% and say yes to everything?
I think that some of it was that I just saw that it wasn't working. Like, yes, I was successful in my career, but I wasn't excited about doing things with my family. I didn't want to go out with friends. One of the things that was very interesting when I look back on it is I've always been a voracious reader. And I realized at some point that it had been over 2 years since I'd picked up a book. And that sounds like a silly thing, but it was something that used to bring me such great joy. And so I now actually use that as like a weather vane, if you will, that if I haven't picked up a book in a week, that, oh, what do I need to reset? Something's going on here. So I realized that something had to change. I did go to a lot of different things about burnout for women physicians. I didn't really find my place in those because I felt like a lot of it was you need to go part time, you need to leave medicine. I wasn't necessarily finding anything that helped me feel like it could be sustainable. And that wasn't right for me. I felt like I've been in this career for so long. I worked really hard to get here. It wasn't something that I wanted to give away. And then I was actually at a turning point for a position. I had to make a decision on what I was going to do next. Um, and I did actually sit down and try to decide, do I want to stay in medicine or not? I knew I was going to stay in health. I was thinking about shifting over to public health. I knew I wanted to stay in education. And I just wasn't sure. And so one of the things that I did was I found a coaching program and it helped me develop as a coach myself. And part of the benefit of this program was that I had to be coached in the process. And so things that I hadn't been willing to try, that I hadn't been willing to um, understand before, I was forced to try in this process, and in that process also had the evidence behind it, and as a physician, I really do lean on evidence, and so having the background of why this can help, why these little shifts can really be meaningful, it was amazing, and the people will often ask me, "What was, like, that one shift that you did?" The one shift that I did that I credit with pulling me out was starting to use do not disturb on my phone. I used to, like I said, take phone calls at all hours of the day, and that meant that I wasn't sleeping. So I started using do not disturb as I was winding down at bedtime. And I would say within 2 weeks, the sleep that I was getting was absolutely different. Like I was a different person within 2 weeks. It's something that is so small, but it meant that I wasn't getting the buzzes from the emails at nighttime, the texts that sometimes residents were sending me in the middle of the night because they were on a shift, but it wasn't actually an emergency. Those things used to all wake me up. And that little shift, which took me 3 minutes to set up on my phone, gave me this breathing space to make so many other changes that just really helped me move forward. And so that was the first thing.
I love that example. It's perfect because we're always talking in the coaching space, and I'm sure you've coached clients on this, that taking one small action can make a huge difference, and you don't have to radically overhaul your life in order
Mhm.
to solve a problem. Sometimes you can do one little thing, and then it caused like almost like a domino effect of
Mhm.
habits and of mindset shifts.
Yes, absolutely. And before that, like you could have looked at me from the outside. I was doing the things you were supposed to take care of yourself. I was working out 5 times a week. I was in bed for the amount of time that I was supposed to be. I was bringing salads to work. Like I was living quote unquote healthy, but I didn't feel like I was doing those things. And so that one little shift gave me the additional energy to then be able to say, okay, let me go out with my kids and not say no every time. Let me call my friends and see them and rebuild that connection that we all know is so important. And so, yeah, that one little shift gave me the space to do bigger things.
That's just such the quotable right there. I love it. I just laughing because 'cause you're like, "Oh, I was doing all the things. I was bringing salads to work." I remember being there too, where I'm like, "I'm doing everything right."
Mhm.
I was in residency, and this is backstory of me, and a lot of people who are listening know this, but I was trying to be everything to everyone, and I was getting up before my OR call, which, I had to be there at, like, 6:30, and I was getting up to work out because I didn't have time to work out otherwise, and so I was getting up at, like, 4:30 to go work out at 5, bringing the salads to work, doing everything the way I was supposed to do, and I ended up with, like, a full-blown health crisis. I mean, I had cancer and, just the whole thing blew up in my face. And you
Mhm.
think sometimes that you're doing everything right, but it might be that you're going through the motions, and maybe there's something else there that you need to tweak that can really just open everything up for you. With your fierce boundaries now and playing with your schedule. You talked about having a very supportive workplace environment for this, but what would you say is the hardest part about being different?
I think that the hardest part for me is that it doesn't look like on the outside, perhaps what a mom is supposed to look like. I think that that's been the hardest part in general. When people are like, well, don't you want to stay home when your kids are little? Well, don't you want to make sure that you're there every weekend? Don't you want to do this? It's the societal expectations that are put on us, that you are supposed to do things a certain way. Well, the certain way doesn't work, right? If it worked, then we wouldn't have the crises that we do with burnout. We wouldn't have the increased number of female physicians who are burnt out and in other careers too, right? It's not just physicians, um but we know that we're not making the same money. We know that we're not getting the same promotions or um having the same joy, if you will. And so what was working for everybody else or wasn't working for everybody else, isn't what I need. And so I think that watching other people be like, oh, but you should be going part time, or oh, but don't you want to wait to take on that leadership opportunity? Don't you want to wait to do those things? I mean, I am very lucky to have a very supportive husband who really wants me to succeed in what I'm doing. And whenever we talk about it, it's always our kids are here and we're happy to do that. But we also have to worry about when our kids are out of the house as well. And sometimes that's just looked upon poorly by others. Fortunately, not by my close circle, but sometimes on the outside, it's looked upon poorly.
Yeah, I think that no matter what, even if you understand personal development, coaching principles, you're very self aware. Other people's expectations and other people's opinions still get into your head. And I know because it's the same with me. Sometimes you just still get those inklings because you know that society thinks that you should be doing something different. And so that's always a persistent thing, and you need to know that it's there, and it's really evolutionary. I mean, we were built to be in tribes, and if there was any kind of social rejection, then that
Mhm.
meant something that was detrimental to your survival. And now it's not like that anymore, but we still have that holdover that is in the back of your head.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to know what you teach your residents about this subject, because there's all the things that we have to learn in family medicine, and then there's the un unwritten curriculum, and we know about the hidden curriculum, which is kind of like do everything, say yes, but what are you doing to teach them about going their own way, about setting their boundaries, about not always saying yes to everything during the time when they kind of need to be saying yes to a lot?
Yeah, so I think that I try to approach my residents in a variety of ways. Obviously, I'm working on the medicine with
Mhm.
and as you mentioned before, I do really believe that it is important to show up with good work and good quality work and good work ethic in order to be able to advocate for yourself to have differences if that's what you want. If you're going to ask your
Yes.
supervisor to go for bat for you, then you need to make it so that they're not taking a risk. So I will just start there. But with my residents, I try to give them little tools to help them get through their days. And I tell them that the hardest part of medicine is that life keeps going. So we have to figure out how are we showing up in medicine as a physician while our families are expecting this of us, or while our families are growing, or our loved ones are ill. All things that I experienced myself as a resident. And so I talk about that so that they don't feel alone with it. And then I talk about how sometimes residency is this time when we don't show up as our best selves. We show up not having the best meals, not having the times to work out, definitely not sleeping as much as we would like. And when you're not showing up as your best self, then that is the time where you really have to take a pause before you respond. And so I find that the times that my residents get themselves into the most trouble is when they really lean into that reactivity that I had when I was feeling burnt out. And so I try to work with them on that to take a pause before they respond, to really understand what is coming at them. So I have lots of one-on-one conversations with residents about like, taking the time to think about that. And then also there is the realities of patient care. In family medicine, we have the admin of the prior auths and the refills and the trying to coordinate and do all of those things. That's very real. And the quick schedules. And so trying to give them some of the principles of being present in the moment for the patient that they are seeing right then, to really look at each visit as my visit is done when this note is done, so that they can really close the container on that before they move to the next one, which is what all of the charting gurus say and is really great
Mhm.
advice. But if you can learn that while you're a resident and are not 10 years out, then you have that for your entire career and you can just feel much better throughout your career. The other thing that I really talk to them about is being intentional about setting up systems that will work and tweak them when you need to. Because the most important lesson that I try to teach my clients and then try to bring back to my residents is that if you can put in that extra 10 minutes on the front end, that can save you time every single week, then you're just setting your future self for success with more sustainability and more joy because you're out of there faster. You get to move on to the next thing faster.
Yes, yes. I'm sure that you have the clients who are 15 years out like I do, who are still charting at home for like 2 or 3 hours after they go home.
Great.
So, what are some examples of systems that you are referring to that can help you to be a little bit more efficient when you're in one of those busy days?
Yeah, so like I said, I try to really encourage that I'm going to finish this patient before I move
Oh,
forward. And that is something that I do myself. It is very rare that I am in my next patient visit before my previous note is done. And that just really is good for me because then I don't forget. I actually find it harder to go back later because then I forget all of the things that I said I was going to do. I do all of my orders with my patients so that they know that I've done what we were supposed to. And when I do forget something, they can catch me in the moment and then they're walking out with those things. I also have intentional stops. So after I've seen 3 patients is usually when I take a stop and I make sure I get water and I go to the bathroom because I don't know about others, but sometimes just that actual physical discomfort that you can have if you don't take care of yourself can make the day feel more uncomfortable. So that has become part of my system that once I've seen 2 or 3 patients, I'll say, "Okay, I'll be right back. I have to go to the bathroom," and then I will come back. And it allows me not only to take care of my body, but also just to have a quick break and let my brain reset. So I try to do that then, and I try to do it at least one more time throughout my clinic day so that I can stop. I should say my clinic half day because it's in 4-hour chunks. Um, and then I take actual time to stop and check in with my team to make sure I didn't miss anything because there's nothing like getting follow up 3 days later. Oh, you didn't do this thing. And so I try to close the loop in those moments before I move on. And these all sound like very minor things, but really what it's doing is it's allowing me to not have to multitask. It's allowing me to not have to have cluttered information all over the place. And when anything that you can do to decrease the amount of clutter, to allow you to be present in the space that you're in, um, and to get things to other people that need them from you so that they're not waiting on you and causing strife in the communication can just be so helpful, both for you and for them.
Those are all really great pieces of advice. And it goes along with you talking about your own personal transformation from saying yes and absorbing everything and taking one small little thing that seems like nothing and turning it into a system. I turn on my do not disturb every night and I do not look at my phone.
Mhm.
And it seems like nothing, but these kind of little things add up to make big changes in our lives.
I was going to say one of the quotes that I learned as I was
Mhm.
doing my coaching training was small hinges swing big doors. And that's just one of my favorite.
I like that quote too. I haven't heard that one before.
Mm.
Tina, do you have any other parting words of advice for anyone at any level of their career who is feeling stuck, maybe on the spectrum of burnout, feeling like they are overwhelmed and cannot say no?
Yeah. So I feel like one of the hardest things is when you feel burnt out, when you feel overwhelmed, the idea of having to make a change can feel overwhelming too. And I will say that probably kept me from taking care of myself for a long time. And I feel like I hear that from other people as well that, yes, I know I'm burnt out, but the idea of stopping and thinking about what is the problem? How do I do
Mhm.
this? Just feels hard in itself. And so I don't think you always have to know what the problem is to start reinvesting in yourself and to start making that change. And it's important to know that, yes, your workplace might be a lot of the problem, but even if that's the case, there are still things you can do for yourself that help move you forward. By starting to figure out the boundaries that are important for you, it's not a no to everyone around you. It is a yes to yourself and a yes to the ability to show up for them as your best self. And so, really having the opportunity to flip the mindset about what boundaries are, not actually a wall where people can't get to you. Yet, like I said, I like the visual of doors. They're a doorway that tells people how they can get to you as opposed to blocking them out. And so if you can think of boundaries in that way, it is so much easier to start thinking about, okay, what is the first boundary that I can set that will make meaningful change in my life?
I really like that. I like flipping the script and thinking about it in a way that people who are used to helping others and see that as part of their identity can accept it and not look at it
Absolutely.
as being mean.
Hmm. Yes. Yes. And like with my do not disturb, everybody knows that I have it and that they know if there's actually an emergency, how they get to me. They just have to break through twice and then I will get there. So I share that with people so they know they can still get to me, but that otherwise it'll hit the boundary.
Yeah, and they'll think about it too and say,
Hmm.
"Well, is this really an emergency? I guess not."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, this has been a great conversation. Tina, thank you so much. And tell us how anyone who is listening can connect with you or learn more about your work.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of ways to find me. So my website is www.santinawheat.com. You can also reach out to me directly via email at santina@santinawheat.com. And then I am on Instagram as at Dr. Tina Wheat and by my regular name at LinkedIn. I also have my own podcast, which is The Hidden Load for the educators and leaders who hold everyone up.
Excellent. We'll make sure to provide those links in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this conversation.